You obviously had a very good time at the conference.
I did. It was interesting. I was amazed to see so many young delegates at the conference.
And they were swarming round you.
I really was. I seem to be very popular with them. It seems like they and some of the older delegates are rather like a lost tribe. They want to believe in a Conservative Party. They're not quite sure what it really stands for anymore. They don't really know.
But they bothered to go, hadn't they?
They bothered to go. They're interested and they want to believe. All of that was great.
Did it surprise you?
The warmth of the response did surprise me.
Because it wasn't only from the youngsters. You're making that point now, but I happen to have seen you dancing with Priti Patel.
Well, there was a bit of that,
Yeah,
too.
there was a bit of that. Shall we have a look? It wasn't just... That's what's so interesting.
Dear.
It wasn't just the youngsters doing their TikTok-type videos. There was a tremendous amount of warmth there amongst, frankly, the Tory faithful and some of the unfaithful, who were clearly... and you were very clearly enjoying yourself, too. Why did you go?
Well, I went with the GBNews badge, of course, and I was broadcasting from there.
Yeah, so you did do your programme from there.
Yeah, of course. Yeah. But also, and I hadn't been to a Tory Party conference for a very, very long time.
Not since the 80s,
Not since the 80s, yes. I was fascinated to go and meet the delegates. And what was interesting was the real energy was on the fringe. Most of the speeches in the hall were pretty dull.
Yeah, they were pretty...
I mean, the Chancellor's speech, and, it's all pretty dull.
Yeah.
And Rishi tried hard, but...
Yes, yeah.
Not exactly great theatre. It's a party that knows it'll lose the next election. It's a party that is already beginning to have a debate about where it goes after the next election. And whilst I was welcomed by delegates, I most certainly would not be welcomed by the Conservative Parliamentary Party.
Is that... true. Mind you, why would you want to be welcomed back when, as you've just said, they're going to lose?
Well, firstly, they're going to lose. And secondly, I still think on some very major issues, they're in the wrong place. Think about the average family's life. What worries them? Can their kids get a house of any kind at all? Can their elderly parents get a GP appointment when something's wrong? We're off to, visit our cousins for Sunday lunch. It used to take an hour. We better allow 2 hours now, hadn't we?
Or not get there at all.
Or not get there at all. We are living the most enormous elephant in the room of British politics is the level of legal migration into Britain. Migration into Britain.
Now, this is an interesting one because we noticed earlier that on your Reform UK paraphernalia, you've actually put in the word Brexit again. Do you feel that word now needs to belong to you again because the Tories have failed Brexit?
Yes, I mean, we lent it to them. We lent it to them on...
Maybe you gave it up too soon.
Well... There was an election, and it was either Boris Johnson becoming Prime Minister or a Liberal Democrat, Jeremy Corbyn coalition, a second referendum, and goodness knows what else. So
you gave Boris Johnson the Brexit ticket?
Absolutely, and it was the right thing to do. It was
the
right thing to do at the time.
Now you look back on it?
No, because I think a lot of people... I mean, there's no question, on the world stage, with Brexit, we stand taller. Whether it's the AUKUS deal, whether it's leadership in Ukraine, but domestically there are millions of people who voted Brexit because they actually wanted numbers coming into Britain to go down. They've gone up, they feel betrayed. Many small business people feel very, very badly betrayed. So, yes, we are reclaiming the word Brexit.
Yes, because you've said many times now they failed to deliver Brexit.
I'm afraid
so it's not the sort of Brexit you wanted, certainly.
No, and it's not the sort of Brexit that over 17 million people voted for. So there is great disappointment. I mean, look, an 80-seat majority. Boris Johnson had the world at his feet. There was so much they could do, and yet it's been... frankly, just chaos.
Now, Reform UK, with its conference today, isn't going to win the next election.
No, it isn't going to win the next election.
But you must obviously feel that the word Brexit now, hanging it back onto Reform UK, will improve your chances just by the recognition of the word.
I'll tell you what's amazing, is that Reform UK does not have a very high recognition. You're right about that, and we understand that and recognise that.
It's not a great name, is it?
Well, everything needs reforming, from the electoral system to the House of Lords to the National Health Service. I mean, this is broken Britain. It is in need of great reform. But despite that, it's still running at 8% in the opinion polls, higher in some. I mean, it's on course to get millions of votes, and it is going to get millions of votes. And I think what I'm going to say to them today is the real opportunity is this whole legal net migration, plus the fact that no one's got the wit or the courage to deal with what's coming across the English Channel.
What are you going to say to them then about dealing with the Channel problem and the migration?
We'll never deal with it All the while we're part of the European Convention on Human Rights. And that wasn't even, ECR wasn't even mentioned by Sunak, or believe it or not, Suella Braverman didn't mention it. The week before she did not mention it.
And you are going to make a meal of that today, are you?
Absolutely, because this is one of the biggest, most important issues in our country, affecting the quality of life of every family. Nobody else wants to address
Okay, so we pull out of the European Court of Human Rights. Yeah. What do we then do with that independent power? What would you then do?
What we've done, we've gone for endless, cheap labour coming into Britain, both unskilled and skilled. We've de-skilled our own young people, sending them off to university in their millions to get degrees that haven't particularly helped them. We have genuine skill shortages. We have shortages of nurses. We've got so much wrong over the course of the last few years. And I can't pretend this can be turned around in a couple of minutes. What I can tell you is this. I think that what Reform do in terms of its broad manifesto, how we get on in the next election in terms of numbers of votes, Reform will be pivotal in reshaping where the centre-right of politics goes after the next election. I think there's no doubt after that Scottish result that Labour are going to win a majority. But we have to see what kind of Conservative party is it going to be.
Do you think you personally can exert the same sort of influence you did during the Brexit years? I mean, they say you are one of the most influential, if not the most influential person on British politics in the last 10, maybe 15, 20 years. Do you think you can, even if you're not with a party that's actually in power, can you exert that same sort of influence?
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
How? Look, just by being a thorn in everyone's side?
Well, I'm good at that, obviously. But, I mean, you know, if you look at the 2015 UKIP manifesto, right, and I was condemned for what was in that manifesto. If you then take the 2019 manifesto that Boris Johnson won an 80-seat majority on, you find a lot of it is very, very similar.
Yes.
So a lot of the rhetoric that I've pushed over the years has been copied by the Conservatives, but they haven't delivered on any of it. And you can read the Times or any of these metropolitan newspapers to your heart's content. You get outside the M25 and you actually find that out there in this country, people are very sceptical of paying the cost of net zero, very concerned about levels of net migration. These are all things that aren't even talked about in most news.
But do you know what upsets me when you say Britain is broken?
Yeah.
I find that a very dismal outlook. And then I know that a lot of people would say, well, you're the reason Britain is broken. We should still be part of the EU. We would be much more successful with our friends around us.
Well, have a look at the mess they're in. I mean, you know, despite our problems, our GDP figures since we left the European Union are higher than both France's, way higher, actually, than those of Germany. And you can see with this summit that's been going on in Spain, I mean, they're warring with each other within the European Union. Even the governor of the Bank of England, and I'm not a great fan of Andrew Bailey, said actually Brexit has made managing the city easier than it was as members of the Union. So this isn't about, you know, this isn't about that. Broken Britain is about our public services. Broken Britain is about the population crisis. We have a population crisis. We haven't got the schools, the hospitals, the houses, or the roads to deal with it. And this has not been discussed. It's not been debated by anybody, and we're going to make some noise about it.
And you're going to make sure it's sort of the top of everybody's agenda, not just yours.
That's the idea.
Yeah.
And I think, you know, I've got a track record of doing those things.
You certainly have. My goodness. Natasha has asked, I'd like to ask if Nigel's a little suspicious of this sudden interest in him from the Conservative Party. They always want you then when they're in trouble.
Of course. No, she's absolutely right. And you know, was it Michael Fabricant and one or two others say, oh, well, we should beg him to come back and please, Nigel, can you save the next election for us? Well, you know, I'll be honest with you. Not only will they lose the next election, they deserve to lose the next election.
Okay.
And I feel that very strongly.
And Chris has asked, what does it really say about us as a country if we pull out of the European Court of Human Rights? I mean, it was set up in part by Winston Churchill and this country.
Well, yes, I mean, you know, that's 70 years ago. It's more than 70 years ago. And it was set up to deal with the way in which Jews were being treated in the 30s in Germany.
But human rights, human basic rights, refugee rights, they're still the same, aren't they?
No. Freedoms are far more important than state-given rights. I'm not a great believer in state-given human rights. I'm a great believer in liberty, great believer in freedom. The world's moved on in 70 years. This is an outdated court with outdated ideas that through Judicial activism has reached way beyond the original scope and intention.
But even those of us who want to stand up against the state, and look how you've had to stand up against the banks, for instance,
Yep.
if you can't appeal to a higher authority, you can only appeal against your own state government, then you're very, very limited, aren't you?
Hang on. We are the country of Magna Carta. We are the country of liberty, of freedom. We have a judicial system which may not be perfect, but is a damn sight better than that exists in America or most of the rest of Europe. We don't need foreign judges interfering in our decisions about how we control our borders, whether we can get rid of terrorists like Abu Qatada. It took us 10 years to get rid of him because of the meddling of this court. If we left it, what does it say about us? Was the question. It says we are actually going into the 21st century and leaving the mid-20th century behind.
Are you sure it doesn't make us a meaner, nastier nation?
We are not a mean and nasty
Well,
nation.
I don't believe we are.
No, we're
I
not.
worry about what would happen to us if we leave the European Court of Human Rights.
What we need is more self-confidence, more belief that we're good enough to set our own laws, to run a good, free, fair country, without having to refer to some obscure group of people in Strasbourg, many of whom, by the way, are not even legally trained.